Hey guys, how are you? It's Brad Sundberg. I want to tell you a quick little story. One of my best friends, Jared Bradshaw, you can find Jared on YouTube at the Broadway Bradshaws. Jared and I have been friends for years and years. He's a huge MJ fan, MJ collector, and just a wonderful, wonderful guy. He's down here in Orlando, works at Disney with his wife, Lindsay. And we're just amazing friends. We love hanging out. Jared gave me a gift. Jared gives me a lot of gifts, and I got to work on that. I've got to work on my side of gift reciprocation because he's just better at it than I am. But he gave me the gift of Michael Jackson number ones, the vinyl. I wanted to do something kind of fun. Number one, I'm extremely grateful of the gift, so don't let anything that you're about to hear me say dilute that fact at all. I think it's a really, really cool gift, but I wanted to have some fun. So what I did was I set up kind of a listening system just like we did on the History album. And I want to take you through the whole process of what I did. Because believe it or not, I still do love spending time in the studio. And that's what we're going to do. So for the next little bit, I want you to hang out with me in the studio. And I'm going to take you on a little bit of a deep dive about comparative listening. My name is Brad Sundberg. Welcome to the studio. All right, I got my ginger tea. Somebody commented on my ginger tea in the last one. Yes, I do make fresh ginger tea. I chop it up. I use honey. I use a little squirt of lemon, and I'm addicted to ginger tea. I still like martinis also, but ginger tea is a little bit better for me. So I drink a lot more of that than I do martinis. Let's go back in time. Let's go back to April 20th, 1995. Let's do some quick math. That's coming up on 31 years ago. 95. Yeah, coming up on 31 years ago. Bruce Swedien and I were in New York. I've got so many props. I'm really sorry. I gotta move this. For those of you on the audio podcast, you're not missing that much. I mean, I am kind of wearing a cool Disneyland 70th shirt, but outside of that, most of this is going to be, audio descriptive. But there's a couple things I do want to show the people watching on YouTube. In April of 1995, Bruce Swedien and I were at Hit Factory, New York, 421 West 54th Street, which we're going to be back at 421 West 54th Street, Hit Factory, in just over a month on April 28th, doing the full In the Studio with MJ, with my good buddy Tony Black, who is one of our engineers on the project. But we might talk about that a little bit more later. April 20th, 1995, Bruce and I were set up. I think we were in studio, where were we? Might have been Studio 3? It might have been Studio 3 at Hit Factory. And as I look past the camera, these are the exact Westlake speakers. These are my Westlakes. These are the studio monitors that we used to mix the Dangerous album and the History album. Bruce had kind of migrated into a different pair of Westlakes on the History album, and he wound up giving these speakers to me, which is a cherished gift that I really, really love. So I had these speakers set up, my Bryston amp, and then you're going to see a bunch of clips of my Techniques turntable, which is right next door in the music room. So I had that exact turntable, not the same model, same type. That exact turntable was with me in New York in April of 95. We were there for probably 3 weeks, something like that. And we were doing what's called, wanted to do these test pressings. History was a big album. It was an expensive album. It was a double album. It was a huge selling album. Michael had his crazy statues, the whole thing. So we wanted this thing to sound as amazing as possible for the public. So the CDs were made at a plant called Pittman. The vinyls were made in Gloversville, which I believe is in New Jersey. And the cassettes, oh man, we even had mini discs. We had mini disc pressings from Terre Haute, Indiana. Cassettes were done at Carrollton. I have no idea where Carrollton is. So we're set up at the Hit Factory, and we're sending out all of these. All the mastering had been done at Bernie Grundman's in Hollywood. Now the different factories were beginning the early pressings of the History album, and they were sending them to us at the Hit Factory. So we're getting product, we're getting vinyls, cassettes, mini discs, and CDs. In fact, here's one of the test pressing CDs. So Bruce was set up in one room, I was set up in another, and we're listening. We've got our listening systems all set up, and we're taking notes. I have got pages and pages of notes, listening to, the cassettes, the CDs, the vinyls, and even the mini discs, and just making notes. I mean, it's so sweet. I mean, there's Bruce's writing and my writing, comments. Bruce heard a pop on the Pittman CD at 2 minutes of "She's Out of My Life." He writes no. Great. When Bruce says no, it's no. But this is what we did. We had just stacks of vinyls and CDs and cassettes, and we're going through them one by one. They were all, associated to that particular pressing plant. And then we're doing quality control and checking for any little problem on disc after disc after disc. So when Jared, and again, it's a wonderful gift. So when Jared gave me the gift, I made a little comment on Instagram, and I have to be careful not to be too snarky, but I wanted to know where it was mastered, because when they make these reissued vinyls, in fact, over here somewhere, I don't want to dig it out, I've got the reissue. Remember, I think it was Dangerous 25. I bought, or somebody gave me the vinyl for Dangerous 25, and the quality was really not great. I'll just let it go at that. And as much as I hate to dwell on the obvious, Bruce is gone, and Michael is gone, and I'm in Orlando, and so you sometimes get a little concerned about who's watching the store, who's making sure these things are being done right and done well. And what we did for the History album, admittedly, was excessive. I don't think any other artist or any other project probably went into this level of scientific. You have to understand, the album's done. Now all that Bruce and I are doing is listening to make sure the pressing facilities are reproducing what we've sent them properly. So now we're just riding their backs to make sure that the product that you eventually get is as good as can be, is up to Michael's standards. So when Jared gave me this, I thought, it'd be really fun to kind of be a little bit like the old days and go into my music room and kind of pick one song. I did one song tonight, and I might do it a few more times just to make sure that it's a fair representation. So here's what I did. I got one of my original Bad albums. Nothing special about this. It's a store-bought album. I've had it for years and years and years. I have a lot of copies of the Bad album. This one is a really clean pressing. The vinyl is in great shape. So I started with I've got the Bad album. Then I went and I found one of my original test pressings of the History album, but with some of the songs from Bad. So what I'm going to do is I chose the song "The Way You Make Me Feel." It's one of my favorite dance songs that Michael ever did. It goes way, way back to when I was really kind of joining, Team MJ, I sometimes call it, and walking into Westlake Studio D, 7265 Santa Monica Boulevard, walking into that big, beautiful control room with Rod Temperton and Quincy Jones and Bruce Swedien and Michael Jackson and Matt Forger and Craig Johnson and Mark Hagan, Chris Carell and Jolie Levine. That was the crew. And of course, Bill Bray, I talked about Bill a week ago. Bill would pop in and out, and you'd walk into this musical family, this MJ family, and the fact that I was welcomed in was amazing. I was very young. I was kind of learning the ropes to be a second engineer. And it was towards the end of that project that Bruce pulled me in and I became his technical director. So in the midst of all that is The Way You Make Me Feel, that pumping bass line, those giant Westlake monitors, they're called the Westlake SM1s, producing just thousands of watts of audio coming out of those speakers, just, pressing you against the back wall almost. That beautiful Glenn Phoenix, Tom Hidley designed control room. It was the music industry and the recording pros, everything running in just perfect, just like a sewing machine. Quincy in charge, Michael throwing popcorn, Bruce creating these amazing tracks, Rod offering ideas and harmonies. And it was just, it was an amazing time. It's a time that I love to talk about, and I just have some sweet memories from that whole era. So that's, at the end of that project, that's when, the Bad album came out. And you guys bought it, and I bought it. And whether it was a cassette or a CD, of course, this is when CDs were first introduced. So the Bad album is really recorded and mixed as a vinyl album. CDs were still kind of a new thing. So that's why, the song Leave Me Alone was only available on the CD. You'd have to buy the CD and then buy a CD player to be able to play that song. Again, what I did was, on my Techniques turntable, I played the same song, The Way You Make Me Feel, from all three of these eras, if you will. This is when Bruce originally mixed it and brought it to Bernie's. This would have been, like I say, in 95. Now, Bruce didn't remix it in 95. It's still the master tapes of The Way You Make Me Feel. But when he went to Bernie's, he would have EQ'd it a little bit, maybe a teeny bit different, because we remastered it. So mastering and mixing are two different things. When an album is remastered, that means that they take the original 2-track master tapes, they go back to the mastering facility. In this case, it was Bernie Grunman Mastering. And then, play the tapes. Bernie's got those amazing speakers and his decades of experience. And then, they're going to change the compression and the EQ just a little bit, just to make it, pop off the vinyl or the CD just a little bit more. So I would have been involved in both of these, Bad and History, obviously. I was not involved in ones. And that's okay. They're not going to bring me out from Orlando. So what I did was I took the song The Way You Make Me Feel, and I don't really want to show you my notes because they're really scribbly, but I went back and forth between these three eras. Is that the best word? Number one, it was a really fun exercise. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I've kind of had this idea of kind of comparing different, and it was the Dangerous album is kind of what launched the idea in my head, because unfortunately the anniversary release or whatever it was, the re-release, just was not that great. And so maybe we'll talk about that in a future episode. Who knows? But this was actually really fun. And so I have my thoughts. These are not in concrete. They're not. This is just my opinion, and you can have a completely different opinion. But these three versions of the song The Way You Make Me Feel, mastered versions, do sound different depending on which, it's the exact same turntable, exact same everything. I'm just going right down to the three. So let's start with the store-bought. I call it the store-bought. I mean, well, the OG. This is the one that was released in 1987. Depending on who you believe, this album went on to sell 35 million copies. How they do the math is a whole mystery. It was a popular record and a very popular song, The Way You Make Me Feel. When we did the music video for The Way You Make Me Feel, I still remember we were at Todd A.O. Studios in Hollywood, and we had this, just Bruce did well, back then we called it a surround mix of kind of a 5.1. I don't even think it was called 5.1 back then. I remember we were at Todd AO, and it was this huge scoring mixing stage. I think they're called mixing stage. Way bigger than a normal control room in the music industry. And there were 3 different mix positions. There was, I think it was it sound effects, music, and dialogue, or something like that? You know, because the way it made me feel, the video, it's got the whole story. It's got, you know, Michael trying to build up courage to go talk to Tatiana, and all the little gangbanger dudes kind of encouraging him, and I remember watching that video, you know, before the world did, on this massive screen at Todd AO. And we were there, I don't know, till 3 in the morning. And I remember there was a ping pong table set up in front of the control room. And you do get tired, but just watching that video over and over again. And it was a whole different kind of production technique, the way the music mixer and sound effects mixer work together and talk to each other. It was really interesting to watch and learn. So I have so many memories about this song, and just that era in my life. So when I listen to this version, the one from the store-bought release from '87, what I wrote down is that it's bright and clear. It's the Bruce's drums, the placement in the stereo spectrum, everything is spot on, just the way I remember it. It's loud. I can actually, believe it or not, I can be a little bit scientific with stuff like this, because I learned from somebody named Bruce Swedin. I set my volume in that room, and I didn't touch the volume. So the volume stayed exactly the same when I went between the 3 pressings, just to make sure that, because your ears can trick you. Your ears can tell you, ooh, that's louder, it must be better. I didn't touch the volume at all. So it was all from the vinyl that did the work. So my notes on this one were bright and clear. I wrote louder, and I wrote that as I was listening to the others comparatively. This one is, in my opinion, kind of the loudest of the 3. And that's not a bad thing. It jumps off the turntable at you. I wrote that the horns are perfect. Jerry Hayes' horns are just right there, left of center. I can just hear. I have to do it for my ears. I can hear Jerry's trumpet just like right there, just right where it should be. And then the rest of the horn section is pulled back just a half step behind Jerry, and they're perfect. They're exactly the way that I remembered them sounding at Westlake Studios. And then I wrote, Michael's vocal just floats. It just floats right dead center, right where Bruce placed it. And it was just fun to listen to it the way that I remember listening to it. So this to me is kind of like the OG. You know, this is the one that Bruce mixed, and I was there for, and then we spent a lot of time on it. So then I jumped to, in no particular order, this is called the Gloversville mix. So this is from the History album. For us, you know, this is, you know, when we were doing the test pressings and sending them to Gloversville was sending them to us, and then we would listen to these at Hit Factory. And I hope I'm not confusing you. I get excited about this kind of stuff. If I've lost you, forgive me, and I'll try and slow down a little bit. So this would have been the mixes, not mixes, the mastering that we did in 1994. So 5 years after this. So it's the same mix, you know what I'm saying? Same mix, just a different time of mastering. So this would have had slightly different EQ, slightly different compression. Bruce is 7 years older. Bernie is 7 years older. So there's gonna be a little disparity between the two of them. So this I called the test pressing from the History album. My comments were crazy good, clear, punchy. I called it restrained and polished, and the vocals and the horns were absolutely perfect. So what does that mean? And it's just my opinion. Don't take it to the bank or anything. In '87, when we did the original, we were deep, deep, deep in the loudness battle. Every song, every single had to be as loud as possible. You just throttled it up right to the point where it was just bending the needle in the red. And and I think the Bad Album does that. It's loud. It jumps off the screen or off the turntable. But I also think, just my perspective, and we can get into remixes and single mixes. That's a whole different conversation. But I'm just going to go on. I'm going to go on the assumption that the Way You Make Me Feel mix on here was the original mix that we did when we finished the record. Don't dwell on that. It's a whole 30-minute conversation I would have to get into, because we did remix a lot of the songs on this album as they were released as singles. It gets very complicated. I don't want to go there right now. But just imagine the same group that I told you about: Rod, Bruce, Quincy, Michael, Craig, Mark, me, Matt, in the studio, cranking away, knocking out mix after mix after mix, getting ready to get this over to Bernie's in 1987. Well, Bruce is getting tired. You know what I mean? We're all tired. And I'm not saying that the mixes suffered, but I'm just saying that by the time we got to Bernie's, everyone's pretty toasty. And so even though it's loud, I actually think when Bruce went back and remastered this version of The Way You Make Me Feel in 1994 for the History album, I think it's better. I think there's something about this version. To me, it's just, I wrote absolute perfect vocals and horns. So again, it's not that they were remixed. It's just that they were mastered in such a way. It's not quite as loud, but it's just clear and punchy. So yay for the History album. Bruce really took this seriously, and he taught me to take it seriously. Then we get to Ones, and I almost feel a teeny bit bad, because I do not want, if Jared probably is going to see this, and I don't want Jared to feel the least bit bad, because it's a wonderful gift, and I'm grateful for the gift. I'm just being a scientist for a minute. Like Alton Brown is to food, that's kind of what I'm doing to some records right now. And it's all just for fun, nothing more. So then we get to Michael Jackson Ones. Now, it was mastered at Bernie Grundman's studio. I haven't talked to Bernie in a long time. Bernie's got to be getting up in years. And he doesn't get credit for doing the actual mastering. It just says that it was mastered at Grumman Mastering. I really don't think Bernie is doing a lot of mastering anymore, but I could be wrong, man. I mean, he might be in there, 12 hours a day. So it doesn't really say who did the mastering. And I'm not trying to be, a troublemaker or anything like that. But these are my thoughts. It's got more bass. This one actually has, I think they thumped up the low end a little bit, maybe a little too much. I'm not sure. It just seems to have a little more of the boom, 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 boom. It kind of jumps out of the speakers a little bit. The horns, I'm really kind of picky about, how brass instruments sound, and the horns just had a teeny bit of a bright tinny sound compared to good old Gloversville History horns, which to me are just spot on. I'm splitting hairs. These are great albums. These, they come from an amazing project, and that project, the Bad Album obviously has lasted decades and decades. So don't read into too much of this. This is just me having fun. But I do think Michael's vocals on this are just a teeny bit unfocused. They just don't quite have the clarity and the punch of these two guys. Bad Album, it's Michael, it's loud, it jumps right off the vinyl. History Album, clear as a bell. The Way You Make Me Feel on MJ1's, I don't, this isn't really a fair word, but it's the word I used. It's just a teeny bit muddier. It was almost like I was listening to the album through, I won't say a blanket, but a blanket. I won't say a blanket, but maybe a sheet. It just seemed like it was a little bit unfocused, and just a teeny bit muddier than the other two. So for me, the clear winner, and you guys can agree, disagree, whatever you want to do, is the History album. And I know this doesn't look like the History album, but it is. And then number two, a close second, would be the Bad album, the OG. What a great project that was. And then, not trying to be divisive in the least, but MJ1's, I just don't think carried quite the same sonic punch as yeah. It did have more low end, so I think somebody went in there and notched up the bass just a little bit. But I think they might have pushed some of the high frequencies, especially in the brass, maybe just a teeny bit much. And it's funny because when I'm listening to Spotify, not even with these records, but just do you ever go through Spotify and you'll see, like I'll pick on the Eagles for a second. The Eagles, Hotel California. And if you go to the one that says remastered, usually it's bright. It just kind of jumps out of the speakers at you. It seems like for a lot of engineers, a lot of young engineers maybe, when they remaster something, they crank up that high frequency a little bit they're. I should start like a list. Maybe we'll start like a little poll or something, but I just think there's a lot of remastered projects that are so bright. And in the case of MJ1's, yeah, I think it might be a little brighter, but it's also got a little more bass, and so there you go. I'm going to get techie on you just for a little bit, and for those of you under a certain age, you're going to have no idea what I'm about to talk about. When vinyl was really in its heyday, it was kind of a rule of thumb that you put the punchier songs like on the first two or three cuts, because they're a little bit further from the center of the record. So I don't know where the camera is or how much of this you can see, but out here, this is like prime real estate for a record, for a needle, for a cartridge. They love this area. It's clear. Everything about it is just, this is where the best music would normally go. And again, I'm going way back decades when engineers used to care about stuff like this. But once you get to these inner grooves, you lose a little bit of the fidelity. You lose a little bit of the low frequency. And fidelity is the best word I can use. It wasn't uncommon. You're going to put your like big dance numbers out here, and on the inside, it might be a bit more of a ballad or something. It's just something that the engineer and the mastering engineer would have to be aware of and have to compensate for, because you can only make the groove so wide. So on the Bad album, the OG, and on the History album, The Way It Make Me Feel is on cut 2, which is kind of where it should be. It's right there in prime real estate, thumping away, sounding great, and everybody's happy. On MJ1's, The Way It Make Me Feel is cut 4. It's cut 4 on side B. So that could come into play just a little bit, because it's not quite in the same real estate market. The good songs want to be out there kind of in the first half of the vinyl. The second half, you just lose a little bit of the fidelity. That might be part of it. And I think as I go through these, with a couple more songs, we'll see if that holds water or not. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I also have, this is one of the test pressings from the History project from Pittman, New Jersey. I actually went to this mastering plant and got to hang out there and kind of watch the process, which is pretty interesting. So at some point I might compare, the CD, because this was still, well, by now in 94, they had CDs, we had it pretty dialed in. So this should be a screamingly good CD. So just for fun, I might compare that to some of these others, but you're kind of mixing apples and oranges a little bit. So it's really not that fair. So that's it. That's what can you believe this? Pressing records, from from the history album. There's old Bruce. What a sweet guy. Old faxes and things like that. But this is what we did. So it was that level of detail, that attention to detail. That's what made Michael and Bruce such a great team, because Michael trusted Bruce implicitly, and Michael could go off and be on tour. He could be, shooting videos. He could just be being Michael Jackson, which is, 10 full-time jobs. And Bruce was watching out for him and taking good care of him. Again, don't go quoting me and saying, "Oh, Brad says that the new team." No, don't do that. I'm just having a little bit of fun. So go test for yourself. Go play MJ1s. If you still have a turntable, give it a spin and see what you think, and compare it to one of the OGs. I might pull Thriller out. I'm certainly going to pull Dangerous out. So I'm not saying I'm going to do this every week, but it's kind of a fun little exercise. Maybe I'll take you through my music room and, show you a bit more of the process. But coming up mid-March, we're going to be in Paris. And at the end of March, we're at the Hit Factory, 421 West 54th Street, right where I made this book. Maybe I'll bring the book with me. Who knows? Tony Black is going to be there. And it's just going to be to walk through those doors. I haven't walked through those doors really since 95. So to walk through those doors again, it's all changed. It's different ownership, different everything. But it's still going to be really special to be at a place that we call the Hit Factory. So that's at the end of March. April, I'm so close to announcing this, but we're going to be in Bucharest. I can't go into a lot of detail because we're still finalizing a couple things, but we are going to Bucharest, and it's going to be an absolute blast. A whole MJ weekend. Tickets are not yet on sale, but they will be soon. So for my European friends, if you're in Western Europe, come to Paris. If you're a bit further east, we would love to see you in Bucharest. I think they're both going to be amazing. I think Bucharest is going to be a party, if I'm being honest. So that's it. Have a great week. Stay safe. It's finally a teeny bit warmer here in Orlando. I can put on some short sleeves, and I will talk to you soon. Take care and enjoy some MJ music. God bless. In the Studio, the podcast is produced by Maddie Sundberg. Theme music performed by Buddy Nuanez. Artwork by Andy Healy. Studio electronics provided by Golden Age Project, and studio acoustics provided by Acoustic Sciences Corporation. My name is Brad Sundberg. Thanks so much for hanging out with us in the studio.